All right, let's go back to the Constitution before it's completely a dinosaur of history. It's just mostly a dinosaur of history. Oh, and I forgot. We have some exciting things to do today. We get to pass a law. All right, let's review a little bit. One of you secretaries had the list of proposals, right? So, okay. All right, let's review a little bit. Where do members of Congress get paid, or who pays members of Congress? It's not, they have to stand on this certain tile to get paid, not that where, but where does the money come from?
The National Treasury.
National Treasury. The states don't pay them. It comes from the National Treasury. And why do we have this statement here that they can't be arrested for most things while they're actually serving? Is that to allow them to augment their income with, little petty larceny here and there? What's the point of that?
We need their votes.
We need their votes. Okay, a little more.
They need to be able to be there.
They need to be able to be there. And what would some evil, nasty politician do using that? That's a vague question. Mary's very underhanded, so she can tell us.
Have them arrested on their way to the meeting.
Yeah, they can be arrested for some trumped up charge. Doesn't matter if there's no evidence. All they got to do is not be there for the vote. All right, so to prevent that type of thing. And again, if you're thinking, why would they put that there? Okay, because that type of thing has happened. Right? All right. We talked about their compensation and this whole package of goodies that they get, and that they get to pick it themselves. You should try that with your boss. You know what? I'm as good as a member of Congress. This is what I want to get paid. Go ahead. Walk up to Pastor Dan this afternoon. If it works, I might follow you. I'm kidding. Yeah, I got a new desk. I can't find anything, but I have a new desk. I still have a phone. All right, I think that's as far as we got yesterday, or last time, through section 6. Ended up with the last paragraph there, talking about members of Congress not being able to hold positions elsewhere in the government. They can't be Secretary of State and a senator, that type of thing. Why do we have that restriction? Well, come on, we got Hillary Clinton. She could use 2 electronic devices at the same time. That was her excuse for using a private email server at one point. But she didn't. I'm sorry. She went the other way. She only wanted to have one device, so she just used the one that went through a private email server or something like that. Anyway, but then there's instantly dozens of pictures of her with a BlackBerry or something and a tablet out at the same time. It's too confusing to use 2 devices. So, why do we have this restriction? It's not just because Hillary Clinton is incapable of holding 2 jobs at the same time, but it is part of it. Why do we have that? Wow, somebody else.
Can you answer the question?
Why do we have the restriction on members of Congress not holding jobs elsewhere in the government?
Because they get passed to get a new position and then take it when they're done.
Okay, that was part of it, to prevent that type of corruption, all right?
And undue influence between the branches.
Yeah, if your boss is the president and you're a member of Congress, it does give him a little bit of sway over you. So it's to make sure the 2 branches are separate and distinct. So, all right, we get then to section 7. This describes for us how a bill becomes a law. And I think we'll go through the boring stuff, and then we'll get our legislation going in class. All right, so section 7, paragraph 1. It's pretty simple. The next paragraph, you can see, is very long. But section 7, paragraph 1, all bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives. All right, so someone tell me what that's saying. Jacob wants to answer, but he'll share. He's very generous. It wasn't mine. All bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House. Should I read it slower? Or should I pick somebody at random? Anybody work all night, so just so it might get a funny answer from you?
In other words, the House has to make the first decision to raise somebody's pay.
Okay, it's talking about in the revenue, there's taxes. but right direction. The really main point is the House has to start it. We're going to put forth a pretend piece of legislation. Somebody in Congress has to initiate that process. And this is saying that person has to be in the House. The House can do it. If you remember Obamacare's passage, it was passed through reconciliation. There's all kinds of, but part of the issue was there were some taxes in there, and it had to start in the House. And because of the voting, they needed the Senate to agree exactly to the exact wording that came out of the House. All right. There were some other factors involved, but part of it was this taxation issue. So, all right. So any bill, the Senate can't come up with an idea. Let's start taxing ink pens, because that would cause us to use computers and would cause us then to be smarter or something. They'd come up with some great idea. It's got to be a member of the House. Why is the House selected for this? Why not allow senators to do this? You have to think back to the original mode of election. Why would the House be given this power? Really, if a member of the House doesn't come up with some tax, there's no tax. The president can't do it. It's got to be one of them that does it. Why is it appropriate that it's there?
Because it's like part of the balance of power.
Okay, yes. Why particularly them as opposed to the Senate?
Because they're elected by the people.
Yes, very good, Jake. Very good, David. Originally, they were elected directly by the people. The Senate was chosen by the state legislatures. I'm not trying to argue that they should be elected by the people, but the taxing power went directly to the people. Okay, so I think it's very good and appropriate that this is here. So, all right, the second phrase there. But the Senate may propose or concur with amendments as on other bills. So if the House says we want a $1 tax on ink pens to encourage technological advancement and, something like that, the Senate can take that once the House has proposed it. They can add amendments to it. They can say, well, why limit ourselves to ink pens? Let's do markers and mechanical pencils. They can add other things. Once the idea has been proposed, the Senate can make amendments and that type of thing. But the House has to initiate it. The Senate can't start making amendments unless the House initiates it. Okay, so that raising revenue power goes directly to the House, and I think appropriately so.
Question, if they do make amendments, do they then have to send that to the House?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they would both have to, at some point, agree on the final wording. Exact same thing. So, all right, next paragraph. Let's try to just read what this is saying, and then we will come back, read it, and you could write down the important things here. And then we'll go back and look at it in greater detail. So we're just going to read what it's actually saying here. Every bill which shall have passed the House of Representatives and the Senate shall, before it become law, be presented to the President of the United States. Okay, so let's stop right there. So it's saying any bill. By a bill, you just want to think some idea. What's one of our ideas, Sarah? Eliminating the passbook. All right. That idea gets proposed by somebody. At that point, it's a bill. Okay. Any bill doesn't become a law until it's passed both houses. The House and the Senate have to approve, and then it goes to the President. It has to be presented to the President. Now, he's got several options there, but it's got to go through both. That little simple phrase there, which shall have passed the House of Representatives and the Senate, is a pile of things. All right, we're going to go through the typical process here in a little bit with this pretend piece of legislation. There's a whole lot that goes on there. All right, it sounds like just, oh yeah, Don't get the idea that somebody in Congress says, let's go to the passbook in the House, and that afternoon they vote in the Senate, and okay, it goes on to the President. This is months and months and months here typically to get this type of thing through. All right, so it's got to be approved by both houses. All right, and it goes to the President. It has to be presented to him. If you want a fancy phrase to use, this is called the presentment clause. Might guess where the word presentment comes from. Be presented to the President of the United States. Very, very simple idea, but it's ignored all of the time. Who remembers the issue we had with this phrase from Section 1 of Article 1? All legislative power herein granted shall be vested in the Congress of the United States. Does anyone remember the problem that we had with that phrase, how that's ignored today? You can look. You're allowed to use the brain that's on the piece of paper in front of you, or the digitized one if you want.
Does it have to do with the direct election of senators?
No. No. Yes? That is a problem, but not directly with this. We talked about regulatory agencies like OSHA and those. Yes?
People tend to reinterpret that today and make it like a blanket power for whatever.
Okay, yeah, that is true too, but not necessarily this phrase. We talked about OSHA and some of these agencies. Should we let Jacob answer? No. Can you whisper to Davey again? The problem there is Congress will pass or create some agency like OSHA or MSHA or it goes on and on and on, and give them some general power. You know, Occupational Safety Health Administration there to make sure people are safe at work, whatever the particular. And then that agency makes the particular rules and laws that have to be followed. That carries the weight of law, but it never went through Congress, particularly, and also was never presented to the president. All right, so this presentment thing here, all of those laws and regulations that all of these agencies create violate that. Okay, now the Supreme Court ruled that it's okay, but we're not surprised about that. They also said Shem and Avante are just pieces of furniture. That's we look at the Supreme Court and we think, oh, they've got to be right. No, more often than not, they're right, especially recently. But they did rule that this was okay. 1989, you know, back in the dark ages before you were born. They ruled, this is the basic argument, that a modern administrative state requires this. Really didn't even argue that it's okay constitutionally. They said, well, come on, how are we going to run a large government if we really hold to the text of the Constitution? Okay. Hopefully that you can make a better argument, okay, without reading the Constitution. Maybe that's what they did. They didn't read the Constitution. So anyway, presentment clause. It seems very like a how could you get this wrong idea. But Congress has. And it's through all of these agencies. Oh, I've got here, OSHA we talked about, the FDA food safety standards. It's Canada, but Jacob Unger, they have his father and uncles have a store there. And their FDA came in and made them buy all new shelving. They had some wooden shelves. They were painted and sealed and safe. But they said, oh no, that's not safe. They had to buy stainless steel. Okay, we have rules like that are just the creation of these government agencies. And if you break them, you're violating the law. They can take your money, they can put you in jail, and it has the weight of law, but it never went through Congress, other than just kind of very vaguely, and it was never presented to the president. Okay, and that is, it's supposed to be. Okay, can anybody think of the answer to, well, a modern administrative state requires this type of thing? What would be a good answer to that?
Several of the people who wrote this said they designed it for a population of 200 to 300 million, which is roughly what we are now. Like the founders wrote that we designed this, not it works now, but it should work.
Should work in the future, yeah.
You don't change it.
Okay. Do we really need the administrative state? Do we need an OSHA? Not that we want... Do we really need the government to come and tell you that if your boss says, you know, you're 4 stories up and there's a 2x4 across this 10-foot opening, go ahead, I want you to walk across there. Do you really need the government to come and say that's not safe? I mean, hopefully you have a brain and you say, no, I'm not. I mean, it's a free country. Your boss, you're not a slave. You have some choice. And we also have state governments. States can do it. Right? It's not the job of Congress. Right? If we held Congress to the jobs it's actually given, which we'll get to here in a couple of class periods, hopefully, There is no administrative state from the national level, and they could. Literally, if we were going to hold to the Constitution in this part, every single legislation, every single rule has to go through Congress and be presented to the President. I mean, we're talking about an agency that declared carbon dioxide, the stuff we breathe out, a pollutant, and could be regulated. We're talking about those type of agencies.
Yeah, no kidding.
Maybe they just shouldn't allow us to breathe. I don't know.
So if Indiana created their form of OSHA, that'd be completely fine because
Yeah.
it's state-run?
State run, yeah, completely fine. I mean, it might still be stupid and make no sense, but it wouldn't violate the Constitution. Let me say it that way.
Sure.
So, yeah. And it would tend to not be nearly as stupid, because it's a much smaller scale government. So, okay, so the presentment clause. Once again, liberals have managed to figure out a way to get some of the simplest things wrong. All right, so all we have right now is it's got to pass both houses, and then it gets sent to the president. Once it goes to the president, we get several things that can take place. There's ultimately four options of things that can happen at that point. And let's read down through them, and I'll make note of them as we go. First one, if he approves, he shall sign it. That's pretty simple. The president says, yes, I think carbon dioxide should be a pollutant and regulated by the government. So he signs it. All right, so if he likes the law, he signs it. I have my first one here, sign it. That's the first option. The second option, but if not, he shall return it with his objections to that house in which it shall have originated, who shall enter the objections at large on their journal, which we've talked about before, and proceed to reconsider it. All right, so if he doesn't like it, then he can, the phrase is veto it. That word isn't actually used there, but that's a veto. It means I forbid. He doesn't sign it. He states why he's against it. This is a blatant violation of the Constitution. Are you guys insane? Sends it back. To the house it originated in. So whichever Senate or House, whichever one started the whole process along, he sends it back to that house. So that would be a veto. All right. There's some other, with that veto, there's some other, what do you call it? There's a sub-option. I just have it underneath it. Another option that can happen here. If after such reconsiderations, 2/3 of that house shall agree to pass the bill, it shall be sent together with the objections of the other house, by which it shall likewise be reconsidered, and if approved by 2/3 of that house, it shall become law. So there is an option, I just have it under veto. If 2/3 of Congress agrees, they can override the veto, and it becomes law anyway. The president, against his will. I think it was Bush. He vetoed quite a few things, but I think it was Bush that signed several pieces of legislation and basically said, Congress is going to override my veto. Why bother? Right? You know, they talk about, well, he's going to lose prestige, and it'll look bad if Congress overrides his authority. What? Veto the thing. All right? Let it be all them. You say, this is a stupid law. You don't just sign it. Anyway, Republicans are very good at figuring out how to lose before they start the game. Right? That's aggravating. But anyway, that's just part of the Constitution. You can say, I disagree with this thing, send it back. If they really want it, they can pass it all on their own. And if it goes south, it's all them. Obamacare, as it's gone south, right? The Republicans here in a strange moment, not one voted for it. All right, so the Democrats, they can't blame anybody but themselves, although they have. They've actually said, well, the Republicans have gotten in the way of implementing it. If they hadn't gotten in the way of implementing it, it would be all good. So it's still the Republicans' fault, even though they had nothing to do with it. But anyway, the Republicans especially, they say, oh, we can't veto that, it'll just get overwritten. Really, it's just the process. You don't, just like someone in the House that votes no on a piece of legislation, they don't go home, and it later passes, they don't go home and say, man, I'm shamed and, life is over. No, I disagreed with it, and that's it. So anyway, so we have the veto option with that sub-option there of overriding the veto, and it requires 2/3, a significantly larger portion to vote it. One more statement there about this overriding the veto. But in all such cases, the votes of both houses shall be determined by yeas and nays, and the names of the persons voting for and against the bill shall be entered on the journal of each house respectively. So remember that journal we talked about here? They're being very clear here that if there's a vote to override a veto, everybody's voting yes or no, and your name is recorded with how you voted. And they're not just going to put in the journal, we had, 200 votes for, 300 votes against, or whatever. It's names and yes or no. So anyway, explicitly stating this has to be recorded in the record of how they voted. Okay, so we have sign it, veto it. That's the first two options. There's two other options that are kind of intertwined here, but let's look at those. If any bill shall not be returned by the President within 10 days, Sundays excepted. And here's an interesting point, complete little rabbit trail here. Why would they pick Sundays?
Because it's the Lord.
Yeah, they were Christians. All right? They were Christians. They didn't pick Saturday for the Jews. Okay? They were Christians. It was a Christian nation. All right? Not all of them saved, but at least Christian in a very vague sense of Christian. So, all right. If any bill shall not be returned by the President within 10 days after it shall have been presented to him, the same shall be a law in like manner as if he had signed it. Okay, so that there, if the President just ignores the thing and does nothing, it becomes law. All right, so you got 10 days to either veto it or sign it. And if he doesn't do one or the other, it becomes law. Okay? Why would there be that phrase there? Why give the President 10 days? Come on, think about Obamacare. It takes a long time to read all those pages. I'm kidding. Nobody read the whole thing. Literally, we had staffers, in some cases, college students who were there interning for some senator, writing the legislation, coming up with the language, and nobody read it. Nobody read the whole thing. I mean, it was just insane. Insane. All right, why do we have that phrase there about these 10 days? You all look at me like, how could that, why would we have that phrase there? Aren't they all Christians working together in brotherly love and harmony? If you were president and they pass a law legalizing abortion up into the point of delivery, and you didn't want to veto it because Congress might override it, and you didn't want it to become law, just let it sit. All right, if the president wanted to, he could just never sign anything. and then the whole thing stops. So this forces him to address the issue. You can't just sit on it. All right, so he's got 10 days to go one way or the other, and then it becomes law automatically. Okay, hopefully if that law bill came to you, you'd veto it. All right, but anyway, it's to force them to deal with it. Otherwise, they would just sit on it and do nothing, and there would be really nothing Congress could do to directly. You still have the option of cutting off NIPSCO and firing or getting rid of the president's private chef, making Michelle cook him his. See her heating up some tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches for him. He might have a little bit of rough meals for a while. I think she's kind of rusty. All right, so we have the 10 days. He has to address within 10 days. All right, then we have the fourth option. Okay, starts there, unless the Congress by their adjournment prevent its return, in which case it shall not be law. Now the veto thing, if the president's going to veto something, he writes his objections on it and sends it back to Congress. Okay. Imagine being in Congress and you've got this great plan. Let's pass this thing, send it to the president, and we're done for the year. And if the president doesn't send it back to Congress within 10 days, it becomes law automatically. All right. So this is to force Congress to give him the actual 10 days, or at least if they don't give him the 10 days, he has the option of ignoring it, and it doesn't become law. Right. This is referred to as a pocket veto. So if Congress sends the president something in the middle of December, just before they end for the year, he can do nothing with it, and it dies. Right? A pocket veto. So, Congress would pass everything on the last day. all right, if this wasn't there. Again, both sides would abuse this. This really forces them to makes it a real negotiation. I mean, neither side can just blanketly here abuse their power. All right, so we have 4 options there as we got. Then he could sign it, he could veto it, he could let it sit for 10 days and it becomes law, or he could do the pocket veto. That's a situation where Congress adjourns, they quit their meetings for the year before the 10 days are up.